And I'm live. Hello, everybody. All right. Welcome to the Cosi Talks live show. Running a few minutes late tonight. We had a little change in our program for this evening, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I'm just going to give you guys a minute or two to jump on board. For those of you watching the replay, give me a shout out in the comment section. Just say replay. If you have your questions, go ahead and put them in the comment section there. I do go back and read the comments after the show closes down for anybody who wasn't able to watch it live. So I'm going to sit here for a moment, catch my breath while I wait for you guys to come on board. I'm also going to go live on my Instagram account. I almost forgot to press live there. So I know that that was kind of one of my New Year 2024 advances with Cosi Talks, is that I started broadcasting to my Instagram channel. So I've got that up and running. All right. So this is great. Okay. Back and forth. We got this. All right, guys, as you jump on board, give me a shout out. Don't be shy. Let me know who you are, where you're from, and what is in your coffee mug. I am treating myself. I've been trying not to drink any kind of coffee at night, decaf or otherwise, but today I needed some decaf, and so I'm enjoying this one tonight. Hey there, Geert. Thank you for joining in this evening. We got Emily coming in from Central PA. She's got her vanilla cold brew with raspberry. You always have the best drinks, Emily. I'm coming over to your house for happy hour next time. All right, guys, who else we got on board? We got a lot of people coming on board. I can see already. And from our Instagram side, we got, hey, Mark, what's going on, man? I am so glad. I've missed you the past couple of live shows where you said hello and I missed your comments. So glad to see you, man. We got Tina on board. We've got Hugh, and we've got quite a few others on board from the Instagram channel. So guys, thank you for joining in. If you're new to watching me through the Instagram channel and you've never seen the Cosi Talk show before, I love to interact with my viewers. So don't be shy. Put your questions in. Give me a shout out, however it is. We got Tom on board. We've got a lot of people that popped on board. We got Rob from Woodsville, Indiana with his decaf coffee. Cheers to you, Rob. We've got Casey coming in, currently in Texas. Casey, I feel like you're everywhere around nowadays. We got Daniel, Pamela from upstate New York with her protein shake. We've got Don coming in from Vancouver, post-workout protein shake. Getting your protein in, man. Good for you. We've got Kimberly listening in on my YouTube channel. So guys, just as a reminder, I am broadcasting to Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Ain't I fancy? All right, so you can watch me from any one of those platforms. We've got Jerry coming in, drinking her white chocolate coffee. I am such a sucker for coffee, guys. I am not going to lie. We got Scott from West Virginia again. Good to see you, Scott. Scott, I got your funny little story here, so I might have to share that tonight because I got a great chuckle out of it. We've got Denise. She's my Tar Heel from North Carolina. Eric coming in with his Powerade Zero. Marianne, there's my Marianne from beautiful South Dakota with her electrolyte drink. We got David from South Carolina and Johnny V from Poughkeepsie, New York. Man, I have missed your introductions, Johnny V. I am so glad you're here tonight. Oh, we got a lot of people coming in on board from the Instagram, and we got Shell from Washington State and Luz from Florida. We've got Nick from Michigan drinking his tea. Guys, thank you so much for joining in. We've got Pam from Indiana with Nada. Come on, Pam, you've watched this show before. You know the rules. You got to bring something cool to drink. All right, guys. So I know this evening, y'all were expecting me to bring a friend by the form of Ronnie Dixon. So for those of you who have never seen my show, first of all, I probably should introduce myself. All right, let's back it up just a little bit. For those of you who are joining me for the first time, welcome. My name is Cosi Talks. I'm a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. I've been a PT for over 23 years, and my passion is working with the limb loss community. So now that you officially know who I am, tonight I was supposed to have one of my sponsors on board. His name is Ronnie Dixon. He is this beyond amazing prosthetist. Also happens to be an above the knee amputee with an amazing story. He is no stranger to this show. I know half of y'all that are making comments right now. Y'all know who Ronnie is. He is also the owner of the Prosthetic and Orthotic Associates of Tennessee clinic over in Chattanooga. POA, Tennessee. Unfortunately, he did have a family emergency this evening and he had to cancel about literally an hour ago. He let me know that he was very sorry, was not going to be able to make it this evening. We will be rescheduling that, so have no fear. So tonight we were originally going to basically have a general Q&A with a prosthetist, which for me, with Ronnie, which for me, I love, because as much as I love answering your questions, I love it when I have the perspective of a prosthetist. And y'all sent in some really great questions. So we're just going to kind of veer off a little bit. We're going to save the questions. I've got like 2 pages of questions, and this is kind of good because it gives you guys a chance to put in more questions. So by the way, that being said, if you have questions for Ronnie, type them in, and I'm going to go back after the show is done. And I'm going to go ahead and gather the questions for him. And I'm hoping to reschedule him for next week. I still need to get back in touch with him, make sure everything's okay. And then hopefully we can reschedule. In the meantime, though, there are some questions that you guys sent this week for me. So we'll answer the PT related questions tonight, or ones that I feel like I can answer decently. And then we're going to save Ronnie's questions for when he comes. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. We got a lot of people coming on board, so I want to give a shout out to my folks. We got Felicia. There's by Felicia. Girl, I can't tell you guys, on last August, I got to meet so many of you at the Amputee Coalition National Conference in Orlando. And you know, Felicia was one of those gals that I got to meet, put a face to the name that I see every Wednesday night. And this year there's definitely at least 3 conferences that I'll be going to, courtesy of my sponsors. And I'm so excited about that because I love meeting folks in person. So hopefully I'll get to meet more of you this year. We got Randy coming in from San Diego. Kimberly says, I don't know how you do it, girly girl. You're busy everywhere, but I'm sure you're happy you do it. I'm happy I do it too, Kimberly. And I have, I have a wonderful husband. My mom is here supporting me, and I have 4 beautiful children. So I am busy, and my plate is full, but my heart even more so. We got Dick Devers coming in with his Miller Lite. We got Pam. Instagram stopped on you, Pam. I am sorry to hear that. Let me just click back over. Instagram is still going live on my end. So for my Instagram folks, start putting those questions in the comments section. All right. We got Kathy on board. We got Jeanette drinking sweet tea from Battle Creek, Michigan. All right, guys. So let's just jump in. For those of you who are new, because I see a lot of new names here, which I'm so excited about. We got Susan, my Canadian girl right there. So guys, those of you who are new to the show is for the amputee community. So that means obviously amputees, their clinicians, their caregivers, family members. So this show is to answer your questions. So yes, I am a physical therapist. So obviously my area of expertise involves the rehabilitation side of amputation, but working in this industry for 23 years, I've learned a little bit of everything, and I'm happy to try to answer your questions. So don't be shy. If you have a question, throw it into the comments section, and I will try my best to answer it. Here we go. Emily coming out with a question. Emily always has great questions. She says, have you ever seen the use of a harness to help an amputee learn to walk? Thoughts? Yes. So, I'm kind of dating myself with this, with any clinicians listening. There was one it was called Lightgate, and that kind of came out when I was first starting as a physical therapist long time ago, right? And it was mainly used for pediatric patients. That's kind of who it was created for. And the concept was that it was exactly that. It was a harness. The person was placed into a harness, and the harness was connected to tracks in the ceiling. Right. And it was basically to offload the body weight of the patient, and to allow the therapist to really just kind of manhandle the patient and not have to worry about supporting the body weight of the patient. Right. So the idea was that as a therapist, you could really just put your hands on the patient to facilitate the movement you were trying to facilitate without the added load of carrying that patient's weight. Right. It's a lot of things. That's one thing people don't realize about physical therapists is it's a heavy lifting job. Right? We have to do a lot of heavy lifting. So that eventually carried over into adult care very quickly. Where I mainly saw the use of these type of harness devices used for walking was in neuro rehab. right? So folks with traumatic brain injuries, folks with spinal cord injuries that were experiencing some muscle return in their legs. So again, you can imagine the practicality of something like that. So for example, a woman, I'm kind of an average sized woman. I'm 5'8", I'm 140 pounds, right? But a lot of times I would get male patients who were considerably larger, considerably heavier than me. So, it was always a challenge to say, okay, how do I get this person who is essentially almost dead weight, and how can I get them into standing? So this light gait contraption, this harness was something, a tool that we could use for that. Okay. So fast forward, and now there's several different kinds of these harnesses I've seen out there on the market. And then, it kind of I started seeing it trickle into amputee care. So I think it's a great tool, and we can talk a little bit about where I think it's great and where I think it's not necessary. When it comes to amputee care specifically, I think something like a ceiling harness would be good for patients who are, for example, morbidly obese. So I'm thinking back to one patient that I had a few years back. He was a below the knee amputee, and he was morbidly obese. He weighed over 500 pounds. So it was a challenge in the sense that he was actually very mobile and quite strong, considering that he had a lot of many years being wheelchair bound, right? So when we were working to get him into standing, right, he was actually able to pull himself into standing in the parallel bars. The problem is because of his really poor endurance, he couldn't stay standing for more than a few seconds. So in that particular patient case for amputee, this harness would have been a great tool for him, because it would have obviously offloaded the weight, and it would have allowed him to be in standing for a little bit longer period of time. Excuse me, and allowed him to just initiate weight bearing a little bit better, right? I did have a very well-meaning prosthetist who retired, and he had a setup like this in his clinic, and he wanted to donate it to me. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to accept it because the clinic where I work, I don't own that clinic, so I use my colleague's clinic. But in general, for amputee care, I don't find that I want to use a harness. And again, this kind of goes back to my old school PT ways. I'm a very hands-on physical therapist, right? And you'll find that a lot of your neurophysical therapists, your amputee physical therapists, we use a lot of manual techniques, a lot of neuromuscular facilitation, where we, with certain hand placement, we will facilitate a patient in how they move. Right. So part of that is teaching a person how to get into weight bearing and slowly doing that. So in that regard, I don't find the harness to be very helpful for the majority of my light just went out. I guess I should have charged the battery on that. Well, you guys will be able to see me. I think you guys can see me well enough. So I find that the harness for the majority of my patients, 95% of my amputee patients, wouldn't be applicable. Emily, for someone like yourself, because you have a history of the spina bifida, you have weakness, you have a lot of things going on right now, I think the harness would be something interesting to perhaps trial. So if the rehab clinic that you're in has a particular harness, that might be a conversation you might want to have with your physical therapist, and just ask them, hey, would I be a candidate for using something like this, and just see. I know I'm not very articulating very well the why I don't use it for my amputee patients. I guess the biggest thing is because here's how I can say this. From the very beginning, when I start working with my patients, I start working on weight bearing, right? And I actually really want my patients weight bearing through their socket to get that proprioception going. Okay. So when you put someone in a harness like that, you're not allowing them to really put their full body weight into the harness, because that's the whole purpose of the harness, is to make it lighter for them. Right. So, you might see someone who is able to walk a little bit with more confidence, but at some point they're going to have to start putting weight into that socket. So that for me is kind of one of the bigger reasons why for an amputee, a harness is not going to be a tool that I use very often. I hope that makes sense, guys. But that's a really great question, Emily. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question before. Casey says the biggest difference between amputee PT and a physical therapist that does not have much experience with amputees is the hands-on. Yes and no. Yes and no, Casey. So here's the thing. Any general boo-boo bear physical therapist with a license, right? With a license in any state, they are going to have all the knowledge they need to treat amputees, right? And it goes back to the beginnings of my profession. Physical therapy, there's like little whispers of PT emerging in Civil War, but in World War I is where we really started booming in the profession because we were physician extenders, right? But the two biggest populations we treated in the early years of our profession were amputees and burn victims. And what are the two smallest specialties now in physical therapy? Amputee and burn. Isn't that weird? And that also happens to be the two specialties that I really loved. I used to do a ton of burn trauma. Anyways, getting off track. So basically, your licensed physical therapist will have all the tools that they need and all the education and training they need to work with any amputee that comes through their clinic. Okay, why? Because gait training, analysis of gait, right? That is the bread and butter of our profession, right? And we all as physical therapists receive heavy gait training and assessment and analysis and diagnosis and treatment and everything about the gait cycle. I've been studying the gait cycle for like 25 years, right? And then we also receive really comprehensive training on neurological deficiencies and pathology, right? And you guys have heard me in the past say how much I pull from my knowledge of working with neurological patients, and I use those strategies for amputees. The thing is, a lot of PTs don't realize this, right? Especially if they didn't receive specialized amputee training within their education. They don't realize that they already have a lot of this knowledge already available, okay? The biggest difference is that your amputee physical therapist should know a little bit more about the prosthetic side. And that's honestly, when I speak to some of my colleagues who are amazing physical therapists and clinicians, that's the part that is intimidating to them. And they get a little, sometimes a little spooked by the prosthetic side of things. Okay. But that's basically the truth of it. So, let's see. Ernest says, totally understand, better to provide physical cueing and facilitation as long as it's safe. Yes. And that's absolutely the thing, and again, with the physical therapy training, like I said, I had to train and learn how to work with patients who are much larger, much heavier, and then obviously very low mobility. So that's a huge part of our training, is learning how to safely handle these patients. I remember coming home and just, talking to my parents sometimes about some of my cases, and they would say, how in the world were you able to, hold up that individual and they didn't fall on you? And I go, well, that's part of the training that we receive. Right. And we also have the aid of tacks and sometimes other devices. Rob says he used his harness on a treadmill and endurance walking. It was loose enough to be used for safety. And again, I've seen that done. And again, guys, I got nothing against those strategies. There's some PTs that's the strategy they like to use. Me personally, I don't use that because I think that sometimes it creates a false sense of safety. And I tend to be really, to the wall, rip off the Band-Aid and let's get going. So for me, from the very beginning, I am having my patient put the full weight in their prosthesis. I'm really doing a ton of foundational training and getting their foundation really nice and strong so that my patients are confident on their feet and from day one with the simplest of activities. But again, guys, there's more than one way to do this. So on their aisle, Susan asks, why do amputees always seem to sweat? I'm done with menopause, but I still sweat. Yes, Susan, it's not your imagination. Part of it is the menopause. Yes, part of it has to do with hormones, but also part of it is just being an amputee. So when you lose a significant part of your limb, as you do with a lower leg amputation, even if it's a below the knee amputation, you're losing a lot of surface area, right? And you're losing sweat glands from that surface area. So your body has less area to sweat from. right? And what's the reason why we sweat? We sweat to keep our body temperature where it needs to be. We sweat to get rid of toxins in our body. That's one of the ways that we get release toxins in our body. And our body still needs to do this after amputation, right? So it's going to have to work a little bit harder to release all that sweat from a smaller surface area. Okay, we've talked quite a bit about this on the show. There's one dermatologist that I really want to bring back on the show because I think they can really give us some great insight on sweat management. With some amputees, they continue to sweat and they experience increased sweat for, the rest of their lives. Some amputees will tell me that they only experience more sweat on their residual limb. And some amputees say that over the course of time, things kind of stabilize out. And we've talked a lot about sweat management. But yes, Susan, definitely when it comes to especially my female population, reaching perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, where on top of having less body surface area for you to sweat from, you've got your hormones that are going crazy and cuckoo on you, right? So you're going to have the hot flashes and the night sweats and things like that. That's something that I'm learning more about as we get more knowledge on how hormones affect women and how it's something that's just a lifelong thing that we need to address. Matthew, man, it's good to see you. Yeah, it has been. It's been a long while, man, but I am glad to see you. All right, man. Let's see what else we got. Ed. Ed says, no other professional clinician is better trained to treat an amputee than a PT, even if they have not treated amputees previously. Said like a true physical therapist. Guys, I'm going to give a shout out to Ed Lyons right there. He is an amazing physical therapist over at Johns Hopkins. He's been on my show. If y'all haven't seen my show with Ed, Ed, you need to go to my YouTube channel and check out the show I did with him and Susan. He treats osseointegration patients, specifically with the OPRA system, and he is quite the expert. So guys, go to my YouTube channel, check out that show I did with Ed. When did we do that show? I feel like it was in May of last year. Was it May? I think it was May. And then to hear Susan's story is just incredible. Scott says, I feel that my size is part of my limitation in therapy. And again, I've had experience working with a lot of folks who are morbidly obese. So folks who are 400, 500, and even 600 pounds and more. One thing when I first had a patient who was, significantly larger, was certainly very intimidating for me because I'm thinking, how am I going to be able to help this individual mobilize in a safe way that's safe for the patient and safe for me? And one thing that I learned is that, folks, they learn how to move themselves, and it's pretty amazing. So for the most part, many of my amputee patients that are considered to be morbidly obese, I can still have a lot of success if they've been able to maintain their mobility in some way, shape, or form. So whether it was because they are able to transfer from their wheelchair to a chair or wheelchair to their bed independently, if they're even able to just stand in their walker for a few seconds, right? If they're perhaps even able to take a couple of steps with a walker or crutches. Usually it was with a walker. Okay. So, the parallel bars, this is where for me, the parallel bars are like my favorite tool in physical therapy and amputee training, because this is where you can really provide a safe environment for anyone of any size, right? And you can really get a lot of work done there. Okay. And there are ways to work around it. So just kind of going back to the gentleman that I mentioned who was, 500 plus pounds and he could only stand for a few seconds. We were able to tailor an endurance program for him. Okay. Unfortunately, because of many reasons, I wasn't able to continue working with this particular gentleman. But for someone like him, I would have designed an endurance program that he could do from his wheelchair to get his endurance going. This is kind of where PTs, we can shine a little bit here, because this is what we do. We figure out how to work around some of these issues to get people moving. I need to sip of my coffee. Excuse me. All right, let me go flip-flop over to my Instagram channel, make sure I'm not missing anybody. I see people popping in and out from Instagram, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions there. So guys, if you are on Instagram and you want to ask questions, throw it into the comments section by all means. All right, let's go back. Let's see. Thomas says, I put a patient in the pool. He was able to increase distance from 100 feet to 400 feet in 30 days. And yes, pool therapy is an incredible tool. I love pool therapy. I actually did one of my research projects and one of my internships, my pediatric internship was on pool therapy. So love it, love it. And yes, for pediatric population, for neurological population, so people with traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, again, morbidly obese population, amputee population. I think water therapy is fantastic, fantastic. And if you have a facility near you that has a pool and an aquatic physical therapist, holy cow, it's amazing, totally amazing. And I totally recommend it. Let's see. You mean glow, right? Thomas, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Not sure. I have no idea what you're referring to, Thomas. I'm sorry. Hey there, Beth. Oh, glad you could come in though. Oh, I get it now. It's referring to the sweat. Sorry. Woohoo. Hey, Lanya's joining it. Oh, Lanya, thank you for coming by. Scott says, I'm pretty mobile with my walker, no balance without. So Scott, that's actually a really great thing because it's harder to balance on a walker and one leg than it is with a walker and a prosthetic leg and your other leg. So even if you're not necessarily experienced in walking with a prosthetic leg, the fact that you have another leg underneath you to help distribute that weight, you can do well. You can do well. All right, guys, I did promise there was another Thomas who sent me a story and I promised him last week I was going to read it and I didn't get to it. So I've got to read this now because I don't want to disappoint him. So Thomas said, I want to share a win story. I'm a right below the knee amputee since December of 2019 and a bilateral lung transplant recipient as of May 2023. So it's only been 7-8 months. On November 4th, 6 months after my bilateral lung transplant, I completed a 5K in under an hour and 5 minutes. I used my wheeled walker for balance due to COVID, but finished the 5K in my 3-week-old leg. This winter, I was able to use my snowblower for the first time since my amputation, and I just wanted to share this. And Thomas gave me permission to share this on the show. So thank you. You guys always send me such wonderful emails with your questions and your trials and your tribulations. And I really, truly love hearing your stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I love it when you guys send me your questions. I appreciate when you send me your concerns, and I hope I am able to help you in some way. And I really love it when you send me a win story like this. So thank you, Thomas, for allowing me to share this with you, with everyone here. Let's see. Susan says, I just lost 38 pounds. Holy cow. From an operation that kicked my butt. And after starting getting a leg and then another, now I need another. Thankfully, government pays 75% for new legs with a reason, and weight loss or gain is a good enough reason. There you go. Arna says, bars are definitely my go-to startup as well. Guys, I love parallel bars. And honestly, as ridiculous as that sounds, it's like as an amputee physical therapist, I don't need fancy weight equipment. Like for me, when I started looking around different clinics to see where I could work and open up my practice, the one thing I needed was parallel bars. And ironically enough, the majority of PT clinics nowadays don't have parallel bars, which is why a lot of times I end up working out of a prosthetist clinic. So it's kind of funny that, it's like all I need is parallel bars and a tennis ball. I do that and I am good to go for any amputee patient. But, there you go. There you have it. Okay. Emily says, how can an amputee safely practice standing at home? Excellent. So worked home health for several years before I opened up my practice, and I had to get really creative with a lot of places, right? Depending on the home that I was in. To me, the safest place is the kitchen counter. Mainly because it's solid. And usually for the most part, it's just the right height for most folks where you can reasonably put your arms on top. And then there's a lot of different ways that you can work around a kitchen counter. The safest way is to put the wheelchair right behind you and to stand up, pull to stand on the kitchen counter, right? Because the kitchen counter is not going to come tumbling down on you. So you can actually pull on the kitchen counter, right? Another way of doing it, if you want to progress, if you find that you're progressing, is you put the walker right up against the kitchen counter and the wheelchair behind you. So you can practice standing with the walker, but you got the kitchen counter right there just in case you need to grab onto that. So that's honestly my favorite way to teach patients how to do standing safely. Now, if you are using something like a KFO, Emily, things can be a little bit more complicated. So again, part of the job of your physical therapist is to teach you and to teach your family how to work in the home. Okay. So sometimes the homework assignments I give to my patients, it's not just for my patients. Sometimes I'm calling in the family members from the waiting room and saying, okay, this is what they need to do at home. And this is how you need to help them. Okay. And I have them practice it in front of me, and I make sure that, they're good to go and they're doing it safely. Okay. So if this is something you want to practice at home, tell your physical therapist, hey, how can I do this safely? And do we need to pull in a family member who's going to be helping me out to teach them how to do it as well? Casey says a few seconds turns into a few minutes, turns into a few steps. Absolutely. Okay. Very nice, Johnny V. He says, today is National Girls and Women in Sports Day. On this and every day, we celebrate our amazing female athletes, coaches, and staff. Let's celebrate all the girls and women who help make adaptive sports so exciting. Amen to that. All right, let me just peek over, guys, really quick at the Instagram, make sure nobody's asking. Y'all are a quiet bunch on this Instagram. Oh, wait, Shell is asking me a question. Yay. How much more difficult will it be when I go from being a left below the knee to being a bilateral amputee? Shell, if you're still on, can you just kind of specify for me, are you becoming a bilateral below the knee amputee? Or are you becoming an above the knee amputee on your right side? Can you just put that into the comment section, please? And then the other one coming in from NMA CDPT, agreed, parallel bars are a must. Wish mine were longer than 12 feet. So obviously DPT, this, I think I'm trying to look at the little picture. It's a gentleman here who's a physical therapist. So yeah, I love a good set of parallel bars. I'm not going to lie. When I went to Mission Gate, I spoke at their Discover Your Possible conference in Richmond, Virginia. Their parallel bars, first of all, it's the most gorgeous clinic ever. It's like this huge warehouse type of a clinic. And their parallel bars extend like through at least two sides of wall. I mean, it's enormous, and it's wonderful because you can just keep going and going with your patient, and it's awesome. So yes, love me some parallel bars. So Shell, I'm going to wait to see if you can kind of answer for me and give me a little bit more detail there. Let's see. Floyd is saying, I need a hip disarticulation socket I am located in Mobile, Alabama, and need an experienced prosthetist, I would think. Yes. It is, obviously the most common amputees that we will see are below the knee amputee and above the knee amputees. Hip disarticulations are not as common. So yes, you definitely will need to see someone who's experienced in making a hip disarticulation socket, sometimes called the bikini socket, right? So, and by all means, Floyd, interview your prosthetist. Okay. And you'll find prosthetists, a lot of people are always like, do I really want to interview them? Is that going to insult them? And it's like, no. Any good prosthetist is going to appreciate if you go and interview them and just ask them questions about what their experiences are with your level of amputation. And again, hopefully when Ronnie comes on the show, in our rescheduled show, he's going to be really able to comment on this. And I'm going to save your question for him too, Floyd. But yeah, ask the prosthetists around in your community who has experience with hip disarticulation. And oftentimes among themselves, they have someone that they refer to. So for example, I know here in Florida, there's one prosthetist clinic over in Orlando that is known for having a prosthetist who does hip disarticulation sockets, right? One of my personal favorites, his name is John Hadding, and he's located, I think, is it Pennsylvania? No, Virginia, somewhere up north of me. But anyways, I've referred several patients to him as well because he is very experienced with hip disarticulation sockets. So Floyd, I would strongly recommend go to your amputee support groups if you belong to Facebook. Start calling the local prosthetist clinics and just start asking who's got the experience with hip disartic sockets. Oh, Jerry, I appreciate that. And my tech team will be very happy. She says, my video and sound is better this week. I know last week it was kind of wibbly wobbly with the connection. So I am so glad that this week, and guys, I still don't know sometimes. Sometimes I don't know if a bird lands on a wrong wire or something like that. My internet connection just goes a little wonky. So I'm glad it's better today. All right, Shell, I don't see you on Instagram, but I'm going to go ahead and try to answer your question. Okay. So if you're a left below the knee amputee and you are becoming a bilateral below the knee amputee, a lot of your success will be determined by how you recovered from your first amputation. Okay. So here's what I mean. You have people who have a below the knee amputation and they successfully go through their gait training process. Okay. Unfortunately, statistics show that if you lost your limb due to vascular disease, you are at a very high risk for a second amputation within 5 years. Okay. So that's it's a very sobering statistic, but it is something that has to be discussed and sometimes disclosed with patients, right? So when I see people going from unilateral below the knee to bilateral below the knee, I actually see a lot of success. Okay. And the key reason for this is because they're keeping both of their knees, right? Having your anatomical knees is a huge advantage, right? Because at this point, you're only, right, managing one joint. And when I mean only, I'm not saying it's not challenging, but meaning you have your knees. So it's basically learning the movement of the prosthetic foot. You have a longer lever arm. You're going to have better sense of proprioception. Okay. If your amputation is above the knee, that's when it gets a little more challenging because you're having to learn to manipulate a prosthetic knee as well as a prosthetic foot. Okay. So, there's pros and cons either way. So obviously the con is that you've lost another limb and you're having to control more joints. That being said, because of your prior experience with being a unilateral amputee, especially if you were able to do your gait training and learn how to use a prosthesis, your brain is already familiar with the process. And psychologically, you're also familiar with the process. Okay. It's not easy, no matter how you shake a stick at it. And that is for sure. This is also where I say you really, really need to see a physical therapist. Okay. I know there's many folks out there who say, well, I put my leg on and I was able to figure out how to walk on my own. And you hear that, but with bilateral amputation, you need to see a physical therapist and you can gain a significant amount of mobility. Okay. I love working with bilateral amputees. I won't lie, at the beginning of my career, it was very intimidating for me because I was just like, oh dear, am I going to be able to get this person to walk? And, so with years and experience, I love working with bilateral amputees. It is a challenge from a clinician standpoint and obviously from a patient standpoint. But you can have some really successful outcomes, guys. Let's see. Scott says, I'm never giving up. Got to push myself at home more too. Scott, I am very happy to hear that. Very happy to hear that. I didn't tell you guys. So I am in the process of starting a podcast and a blog and cheat sheets. Like it's like y'all are going to get like Cosi Talks, everything, right? And that's going to be coming up in the next few weeks. So I've been recording podcasts and getting material up there. But recently, January 10th, actually, a couple weeks ago, I was interviewed on another podcast. It's called the Prosthetic and Orthotics Podcast, right, by Brent Wright. And I finally got around to having a chance to listen to that recording. I'll post the link for that, guys, because I really enjoyed being on this podcast. And it's always fun to be on the other side of the interview chair. Usually I'm grilling people in the hot seat. And this time it was my turn to be in the hot seat. But one of the things that they asked me was, how much of a patient's success with walking is determined by their motivation? Right. And it was interesting. I've never really just had in an interview somebody ask me that before. And, I'm kind of proud of the answer I gave. It's the number one indicator for success in a patient is their motivation. And it sounds very cliche to say that, but it's true. Okay. You're as an amputee, I don't have to tell you guys, right? You're going to run into so many obstacles. You're going to run into having to adjust to a new body, having to figure out how to take care of your skin, how to communicate with the prosthetist, how to learn the different parts of a prosthesis, how to understand how a socket works, how a foot works, knee works, right? There is no such thing as a completely smooth sailing recovery. Okay. But the number one determinant is the motivation of the individual will determine if they are successful or not. And I said it on this podcast when I answered his question. I said, in my years of being a physical therapist, I have had people come to see me that on the inside, I'm thinking to myself, this person has no business walking. They have every obstacle statistic stacked against them. Now, as a clinician, I'm still going to work with them and I'm going to try my best and I'm going to give them the best treatment I can. And because of their motivation and their absolute sheer determination, it was just like sheer animal grit determination, they were successful with their walking goals. Okay. And yet I had other people that, in contrast, should have been doing cartwheels out of my clinic. But because they didn't have the motivation due to issues such as depression, not having emotional support, having difficulty accepting what had happened to them, right? And they were not able to meet their goals. Okay, so I talk a little bit more on the podcast on, as clinicians, what we need to do to help our patients through that. But like I said, I've been a licensed PT for 23 years. I've been working in the healthcare industry for 30 years. And that's an observation that has been consistent throughout my entire time in healthcare. So yeah, don't give up. OneLegged Wonder says, hi, just seeing the part about sweating as an amputee. Can phantom pain be a cause of it? That is a great question. So whether it's like a sympathetic response, like a fight or flight response, and phantom pain can sometimes trigger that, or the fight or flight response can sometimes trigger the phantom pain, which would then trigger sweating. I could see there could be a connection. I'd love to kind of read and dig into that a little bit more. I love the name, by the way, OneLegged Wonder. I think that's kind of cool. Okay. Beth says, I started swimming 3 years ago and I could barely do 35 yards. Last March, I was the first amputee to go to Weeki Wachee Mermaid Camp. I remember that. Beth, you never sent me pictures of that. Just keep swimming and add on a bit more length every time you swim. And sometimes it really is just that simple. Putting in one more step than you did the last time. All right, hang on. Let me check over the Instagram, make sure I'm not missing anything. These folks on Instagram, they are quiet, man. They got to get with the Cosi Talks program here. Ernest says, what? No parallel bars? Blasphemy. I know, right? And it's funny because like when I would go around, whenever I see a new physical therapy clinic in my area, I always try to like just jump in and introduce myself. And I'm totally casing the joint to see if there's any parallel bars. Cause then if they do, then I'm going to like say, can I work out of here if I need to? And they all look at me like I have horns on my head when I'm like, you don't have parallel bars? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah. Anyways, Emily says, I got discharged from PT yesterday. Okay. How's that working out for you, Emily? Casey says, if the hallway is wide enough, the hallway is another good option because you have something on each side to hold on to. And that's true as well. The thing you got to be careful with the hallway, Casey, is if the person is really struggling and they're not ready, like if they're struggling to stand up with the walker, sometimes the hallway can be a little bit dangerous because you don't have anything in front of you to stop you if you pitch forward. So that's kind of when it comes to like a person who really needs a lot of support, that's where I like the kitchen counter, because if they do lose their balance forward, the kitchen counter is just right there, right? Yeah, kitchen sink. And Dawn just echoed my sentiments right there. The kitchen sink. So you can grab the edge. Hey, Dawn, catch me up. How are things going with you? How are things with the wound going? Casey says, CPOs love to be interviewed by their prospective patients. Yeah, the good ones, they don't mind you coming in and asking questions. Ooh, I like that, Beth. I didn't know that. Amputee Coalition has a list of interview questions for when you are looking for a prosthetist. There you go. All right, here we go. Let me keep going. Jerry says, how hard is it for a bilateral amputee to learn how to swim? Do you need to wear prosthetics or can you swim without them? I need my Mbio Costa right now. So Mbio Costa is my buddy. He is my Brazilian buddy. So Mbio is a huge, I think he's the president of OPAF. Is he president? He's involved with OPAF. He's this amazing charismatic individual. He's a below the knee amputee himself. I think he is 61. Mbio, forgive me if I'm overaging you. I think you're 61. And he's basically competing against men, able-bodied men in their 30s and kicking butt and taking names, right? With races and triathlons, right? And he teaches amputees how to swim. Something just fell down. He teaches amputees how to swim. And I had a chance to work with him at the OPAF swim clinic at the Amputee National Coalition Conference. And we had several bilateral amputees. We had one quadruple amputee, and man, she was booking it across that pool. She was amazing. Amazing. So no, in general, I don't start, like if I teach the occasional person how to swim, I don't start them off with any kind of swim devices. Usually it's just a matter of saying, okay, let's put you in the water and let's just see what your body does. And sometimes a lot of times the person kind of figures out how to do it. I like to use a kickboard. That's my personal favorite, swim device to help someone get a little bit more comfortable. And if needed, we use a pool noodle across their abdomen just to give them a little bit of extra flotation, right? Because they don't have their legs to kind of help keep them buoyant. But we have several examples of bilateral amputees. We have actually Haven Shepherd. She's been on the show. It's been a while since she's been on the show, but she is training for her second Paralympics, and she's a bilateral below the knee amputee. And man, she flies in that water. She flies. A lot of it is just getting in there and figuring out how your body works. The nice thing is because you're in a pool, there's no danger of falling. So you can really have some fun and just trial a bunch of things out. I do know that there's some swim devices out there. So for example, some of my folks who like to go scuba diving, they do have like a swim fin. But a lot of the folks that I know of, they just prefer to go in without anything attached. It's just easier for them to swim without anything there. Don says he's doing squats at the sink. There you go. See, Beth says, I don't use my legs at all to swim. I use the high-low chair if they have one. Otherwise, you can butt down the stairs into the water. Yep. Let's see. Oh, Floyd, you listen to the podcast? Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Tom says, I was getting into trouble when my PT put me in the parallel bars. They hated it when I wouldn't hang on to the bars and walked out the other side, but I guess I was a bit of a show off. There you go. Hey there, Sean. Rob says, amen to motivation. So many times it would have been easier to give up. Let's see. Nalitza says, what other methods besides medicine can I use for phantom pain? For me, it seems like it's the only solution. I've tried the mirror, but no success. Nalitza, I've actually, it's been a while since I've done a show dedicated to phantom pain. I have several of my shows on my YouTube channel, and I see that you're watching me from the YouTube channel. If I could ask you to subscribe, by the way, and yes, that's a little bit of a shameless plug, but if you go back into the archives, the live video archives, I've done several shows on management of phantom limb pain, both on with the use of narcotics and without the use, with more conservative treatment. And it's something that honestly, as a clinician, I need to continue to update myself. One thing I will say when it comes to phantom pain is trying to figure out what is the cause of it. Okay. A lot of times folks will experience phantom limb pain, phantom limb sensation, or residual limb pain. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to suss out the difference. And sometimes people don't even realize that there's a difference, right? So we can cover that real quick right now. With phantom limb pain, it's exactly that, right? You are feeling pain typically in the foot that is no longer there. Right? People think they're going crazy. They're looking down and they see that their leg is not there anymore. Their foot is not there, but yet they're feeling pain, crushing, burning, stabbing, spiking, electrical pain, right? Some sort of horrible pain where it used to be. Phantom limb sensation is just the sensation of the foot, right? They feel like they can wiggle their toes. They feel like maybe there's something pushing up on their toes. They might feel a little bit itchiness, right? Where the toes used to be, but there's no pain associated with phantom limb sensation. And then that brings us to residual limb pain. So that's pain that's in the actual residual limb itself, the limb that is still there and present, right? Now, the tricky thing is sometimes residual limb pain can trigger phantom limb pain, right? If you have a neuroma, if you have a bone spur, if you have scar tissue, right, and it's tickling up on a nerve, that could send shocks of phantom limb pain. If you have issues, perhaps like a herniated disc in the back that is compressing up on a nerve root, that can also cause nerve pain. So when it comes to phantom pain, I really emphasize on trying to see if you can figure out what is causing that pain. And it may give you better guidance for treatment, right? So if you know that your phantom limb pain is being caused by a neuroma, you need to address the neuroma. And there is a surgery called targeted muscle reinnervation that specifically addresses the neuroma and helps with phantom limb pain, okay, versus another cause. Emily, I'm sorry to hear that. And I really, really hope that you're able to get the insurance to pick up the slack. Hang on. Sorry, I'm reading through all your comments, guys. Dick Dever says, I use my back deck railing as my parallel bars to practice walking. Yeah. And guys, with home health, I used to really enjoy trying to troubleshoot. And I had some patients who actually built their own. I had 1 or 2 patients that built their own parallel bars, and they did a really great job of it in their backyard. And it was awesome. I was just like, yes, I get to work with parallel bars in the home environment. This is awesome. Jerry asks, I know some people are struggling with the new prosthetics and going back to the pin prosthetics. Is that common? Sometimes yes. And Jerry, actually, that's a great question. I think I'm going to save that one for Ronnie for when he comes to, so he can give his prosthetist perspective on that. It doesn't mean that it's like a backsliding or a failure. Some people just prefer to have a pin lock. And that's their preferred form of suspension. Usually it's people start off with pin lock because it's a very safe way of suspending the leg, and they might progress to suction suspension or some other form of suspension. But some people might try another form of suspension and say, nope, I like my pin lock. Hey there, Tracy. Thanks for joining in. I know. And some people say the mirror box therapy for phantom pain doesn't work. And I get it, guys. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone. One of the reasons I always like recommending mirror box is because it's cheap. All you need is like a $10 mirror from Walmart. It doesn't involve the use of narcotics. So, it's one of those won't cause any harm kind of things. So why not try it? The most common feedback I get from people who say that mirror box therapy didn't work is they'll say, well, I put it on or I used it, and when I had the mirror in between my knees or my legs, it worked. But then the minute I took the mirror out, my pain came back. Okay. And that's a tough one to hear, because you just hear people that they're in pain and they want relief. So some of my patients in the past, I've said, look, if it's the middle of the night and you just need some relief from this phantom pain, and that mirror gives you that relief, even if it's just for those few minutes that you have the mirror there, just use it, get yourself a little bit of relief, right? And then also one thing to consider is the people who have had success with mirror box therapy, it's usually more due to the consistency, right? And it can take time. It can take a few days, it can take a few weeks, even a few months of consistently doing the mirror box therapy to start to see long-term results from it. So actually, Sean, can I give you a homework assignment, Sean? I'm picking on you today. Sean, I want you to email me. There's my email address. And guys, for those of you who are new to watching the show, that's my email address. Feel free to email your questions, concerns, outrageous flattery, whatever you want to do. That's where you can reach me. So Sean, here's your homework assignment. I want you to email me and say, Cosi, look up the latest literature on mirror box therapy. Okay. So again, usually my recommendations when people do the mirror box therapy is just to start off for a few minutes every day, and just be consistent. Do it consistently. And that, the ones who have had success, that kind of seems to be the common thread. Okay, let's see. So Floyd says, I saw John Hadding in 2019 and he did a wonderful job. He's really great. I'm wearing it now, but I'm limited, breaking skin under my ischial bone. I may need to go back to John or maybe try David Rotter. I've heard really good things about David Rotter as well. I don't know him. I've just heard really great things about him. So I would say, Floyd, if you have the ability to travel to go find that prosthetist, go and travel. And if John, John obviously already knows you, he made a great socket for you. If you can get back to him, I would go back to him because he knows you already. And like I said, I've heard wonderful things about David Rotter. Nat is asking, do you know anything about the Martin Bionic socketless socket? So I know about it. I know of it. I don't have a lot of experience. I've only had a few patients here and there throughout the years with the socketless socket. The adjustable socket that I am most familiar with is the Click Medical. And they're going to actually be on my show, Nat, and we're going to be talking with them a lot this year. They've been on my show several times in the past couple of years. This is their third year sponsoring the show, and I'm really grateful, and I love working with the Click Medical team. So Nat, I see that you're also watching me from the YouTube channel. You can go through the live video archives and you'll find lots of shows where I talk about adjustable socket technology, specifically the Click Medical RevoFit adjustable socket system. And this is an example of it right here. When it comes to the Martin Bionic socketless socket, like I said, I don't have as much experience. I've only had a few patients throughout the years. You need to go to one of their clinics. So again, if you have a prosthetist that is not in one of their clinics, then you have to travel to one of their clinics to get one of their sockets. Here, hang on, guys. I'm trying to flip through. Chuck says, it's my birthday and still in the hospital dealing with an infection, not having as much phantom pain as possible. Happy birthday to you, Chuck. And I really hope that you get better so you can celebrate properly. David says that Mirror Box caused amplification of phantom pains immediately by a factor of 10. That is very interesting, David. I've heard that happen, not very often. It's very rare that I hear about Mirror Box causing an increase in phantom pain. So that's interesting to hear that. David, did you find anything else that relieved your phantom pain? Hola, Gustavo, ¿qué me cuentas? Oye, mucho gusto en verte, mucho gusto en verte. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to scroll through. Sometimes I don't see the comments and then all of a sudden 20 comments will rush in. 48 years young, Chuck. Well, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. All right, let me flip back over here. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. Okay, there was one other question here, guys. Okay. Oh, this one came into me from one of the prosthetic clinics down south that I have a relationship with some of their people. They're a wonderful clinic there. And they said they have an above the knee patient who just received his first prosthesis, and he started physical therapy, but he's having some trouble and he's not really able to walk upright with the prosthesis because of severe arthritis. And in his case, he has ankylosing spondylitis. So I'm going to tell you a little bit. We haven't really tackled specifically ankylosing spondylitis. Basically, it's an inflammatory process of an inflammatory disease. And over the course of time, it causes bones in the spine, your vertebrae, to start to fuse together. Okay. And when this starts to happen, the spine becomes less flexible and results in a hunched posture. Okay. So the person, loses a lot of mobility in their spine. Okay. So for this particular individual, as a new above the knee amputee and experiencing the ankylosing spondylitis, oh my goodness gracious, in the spine, it's going to create some unique challenges. Usually it's a lot of pain. Right. When the person is hunched over like this, they're going to have the pain down the spine, and they're also going to have their center of gravity being pitched forward. Right. So balance is going to be much more of an issue. These cases can be a little bit more challenging, but they can be worked with, especially with, the right physical therapy. Certainly working with pain management. This is one of those times where I would say I would want, as a physical therapist, I would want to work with pain management to see how we can manage the pain of the arthritis in a way that will allow this person to be more functional, right? And then the second thing is what can we do to preserve the mobility that he still has? So whatever movement he still has left in his spine, how can we make sure that we, in a very gentle way, preserve that mobility and strengthen the structures around it? So this is a case that would probably, progress a little bit slowly. This person would be walking in slower, and they would probably have to use a walker for the most part, mainly because of the spine issues right there. Okay. And then also thinking about the kind of socket and foot and prosthetic leg that they would be using. I don't think that this would be a person who would necessarily be a candidate for a microprocessor knee or a multi-axial or dynamic response foot. I think this would be somebody who would need to have something that's very sturdy and very stable to allow them to walk safely. So those are just some considerations right there. And again, this is going to be one where the prosthetist, and I know the clinic that this person is going to, so I know that they're going to be treated very well. But this is where the communication between prosthetist and physical therapist to help troubleshoot these problems is going to be really key for this person's success. Okay, guys, Don says, update on my wound healing from the necrotic tissue, upped my protein 125 grams a day using Prisma and the wound bead, and 1 week have had unprecedented growth of new tissue. Very excited. Don, I am really, really happy to hear that. So last week, guys, Don, if you don't mind my sharing a little bit, because you shared with us last week, we talked a lot about the progress of wound healing, right? And wounds that get stuck and don't want to heal properly. What are the implications there? And we talked a little bit about albumin and how protein intake affects our albumin and why that's important to wound care. So if you guys want to learn a little bit more about that, check over to last week's show. Okay, guys, I have run out of my decaf coffee. So what I want to do, guys, I'm going to close the show down in a few minutes, and I will go back and I'll get all the questions that we want to ask Ronnie for hopefully next week. And just, guys, keep your eyes peeled. Those of you who are signed up for my e-blast, I'll send out a notification to let you know when we are rescheduling with Ronnie, because I know a lot of you want to see him. Me too. By the way, if you're not already subscribed, my email subscription, I don't bomb your emails. I just send really, just important information. Go to my website, sign up through there. Guys, if I could please ask one favor, could you please share tonight's show to your support groups, to your personal pages, if you are so inclined? That really does help with the growth of the show and the growth of the viewers and the reach that other people can start to learn about the show. So when I close this show down, if you could share this show out, I would very much appreciate it. All right, guys, thank you again for letting me be a part of your lives this evening, and for the little, change in plans for this evening in terms of special guests. But if all goes well, I will see you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.